and welcome to another installment of Cargill, RegenConnect, and American Farmland Trust Soil Health video series. For this episode, we will be focusing on cover crop termination. Anna Teeter, Cargill Conservation Agronomist, will be outlining a few important considerations to keep in mind while preparing your termination plan. These include identifying and prioritizing your cover crop termination goals, understanding misconceptions around cover crop termination, and timing termination, including how timing may play a role in choosing chemical termination versus mechanical or vice versa. Of course, our soil health farmers are back, adding their own experiences and insights for cover crop termination. This episode will wrap up with advice from the soil health industry experts you might recognize from our cover crop selection and implementation video. I hope you enjoy.
Hello, my name is Anna Teeter and I'm the Conservation Agronomist for Cargill. Cover crop termination is a very important decision factor when it comes to selecting cover crops. What goals do you have? Do you want to have your cover crops winter kill so you don't have to manage in the spring? Are you able to seed it early enough to get good growth?
Our goal is to, if we can reduce fertilization through using livestock manures or nutrient recycling through cover crops or nutrient reproduction through like legumes, so maybe we can look at various legumes to offset some of our nitrogen costs. That's one of them. Improve the soils because, my children will be the next ones to take this over, and we need to continue to improve so that they can be productive.
There are also some misconceptions I want to address. Cover crops take up too much moisture or cover crops keep my soil too wet is a common one. How can it be both things? Cover crops and reduced tillage protect your soil by insulating it and buffering temperature swings. These practices ensure that during the cold snaps in spring, soil will be warmer, and during the hottest parts of the year, soil will be cooler. This means plants are less stressed and therefore use less water. Terminating these cover crops too early or too late, 3 weeks or more prior to planting, can prove both myths. In wet conditions, you can take away a plant that was transpiring water from the soil to the atmosphere and leave a wet mulch on the soil surface, which will push planting dates even later into the season. In drier springs, the mulch left behind after termination can protect the crop in the soil from evapotranspiration.
What level of growth did it get to or achieve really mandates about how we're going to terminate it. I would love to leave it as long as we can. That's why it's interesting about from the 110 pounds down to the 30. We're hopeful that maybe we can leave that 30 go for a long time. Let the other crop canopy it and let it go on to maturity. We're going to see. We're going to actually leave 30 acres and try that and see. So we'll have enough strip trials in that field that we can harvest that and see what the difference is. We don't know.
Our ground is easier to plant into. It seems like we have much healthier plants and emergence. I think we can, we can get through those droughty periods in that July-August time frame when some of the ground that's a little bare heats up much quicker, and then you lose a lot of that moisture. Well, I've seen that moisture come into play by adding a few extra bushels onto our corn or beans, especially if your beans don't canopy until later on, or we've done 30-inch rows where we've been able to keep some of the moisture and ground protected until those beans actually were able to canopy. Honestly, the economic benefit has been, I feel, tremendous, because if we hit droughty periods, I think we're going to capture a couple extra tenths of water that maybe the neighbor may not have from working the ground and planting. We just don't know what the weather's going to be.
So how do I terminate? There are several methods for cover crop termination, including chemical, mechanical, and species selection. We will focus on chemical and mechanical for now.
So we'll go in and terminate about a couple days before our corn planting, and then per the label of the 2,4-D, 7 days before beans. We kind of watch the weather and what's going on. In 2019, when we had the issue of delayed planting, we kind of had to come up with another game plan, and we actually used glufosinate or Liberty. And we went in, sprayed, planted, or planted then sprayed, either or, and it worked wonderful.
Understanding termination and how you terminate it is a big deal as well, and how you integrate that into your operation, because it's like anything else. Termination doesn't mean you're going to get 100%. It doesn't.
So when do I terminate? The most conservative approach is terminating 2 weeks prior to planting so that the cover crop completely dries off.
So advantages and disadvantages of different methods of termination are the obvious, really. You know, chemicals, we're using a chemical to terminate, right? And if we believe that using less pesticides is good and better for mankind and the environment, then eliminating or reducing the use of pesticides is a good thing. Obviously, that impacts the ROI as well. What our springtime looks like with managing and terminating cover crops is probably a little bit unconventional. We do and have from the get-go planted everything green. We literally want to get as much growth as we possibly can out of our cover crops in the springtime before terminating them. We go in and we plant into the standing cover crop mix, whatever that happens to be, corn or soybeans, doesn't matter. Within a couple of days, we go back in and either spray to terminate chemically and then roll and crimp. Cover crop mix is one that can be terminated exclusively with a roller crimper. Then we will do that.
Chemical herbicide is the most popular tool for cover crop termination. In most years, chemical is fairly affordable and it is easy to terminate quickly. You must be targeted and intentional about your approach and your applications. Do not cut rates. If you don't get a complete kill, you will have to apply again and spend more money. Buy generic if possible. Prioritize using glyphosate when terminating grass cover crops, and find alternatives or tank mixes for broadleaf weeds. Combining grass herbicides with broadleaf herbicides can result in an antagonistic effect or poor control. For example, using clethodim with 2,4-D or dicamba. Additionally, using atrazine or metribuzone with glyphosate can cause an antagonism and very poor control of annual ryegrass. As a general rule, apply systemic herbicides early in the day on still, warm, sunny days between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. to allow for penetration. Apply before the reproductive phases of cover crops, especially grasses. Contact herbicides like paraquat and glyphosate can be used in cooler spring situations, but make sure you get complete coverage.
We've been fortunate, other than a couple of crazy experiments that we've tried. We didn't properly understand what chemicals would terminate what types of cover crop. We've never had an issue with terminating chemically. We've been able to terminate the cover crop on the first time chemically.
Mechanical termination is very popular in organic production and in cases where strong weed protection is desired. This type of termination is usually done with cereal rye at anthesis when planting soybeans. It is usually done at least 3 weeks prior to planting. Use a roller crimper so that the stem of the plant is truly broken and the plant dies off. You can also use roller crimping and herbicides in combination if it is getting later than anticipated for cash crop planting. While mechanical termination isn't as common as chemical termination, it can still be an effective method, especially for tough to control weeds.
We're looking at roller crimping some of our rye. You know, that's challenging, but yet it's going to be interesting to see how we can suppress weeds, reduce the herbicide application, and just really see how we can continue to improve our soil that way. The challenge with roller crimping is timing and which cover crops it works best on and which ones it doesn't. We got to make sure with cereal rye or any of those grains that we hit it at that time where it's in a reproduction or anthesis, where it's shedding the pollen. because that's when you kill it and that's when it's actually going to be most effective. But again, that's not till later in the growing season. So how do we do the balance between the two?
As far as the roller crimper goes, again, we're pushing the envelope on that. Cereal rye and some of the other grasses, no problem. As long as you let that cover crop get to the appropriate growth stage, you can kill it with a roller crimper where you're actually crimping the stem of that grass. We've pushed the envelope trying to terminate some cover crop that were part of a mix that, weren't typically ones that you could terminate with a roller crimper, and we've had a little bit of backlash with that and had to go back in and rescue spray. But again, the idea is we're constantly trying to push that envelope to see what we can do more mechanically as opposed to chemically.
If you are interested in planting green or the weather forces you, take your time to set your equipment right, especially in your first few fields. I do not recommend tilling at this point in time, as the cover crop will become a larger mess than if you just planted green. This will slow you down initially, but once you're set, you should be able to keep on moving. When should I spray herbicide if I plant green? There are several farmers experimenting with application timing, but if you are risk averse, I would rather you follow the planter with the sprayer so that you don't delay your termination. Other best practices when planting green is to scout for pest pressures like true armyworm so that you can implement integrated pest management strategies as soon as possible. Additionally, herbicides with long residuals, which are applied late in the season, may impact growth of cover crops planted after harvest. This can be easy to forget and impact establishment for next fall. Remember, you should decide how you want to terminate your cover crop even before you plant it. Then have a plan A, B, and C. Knowing that your first plan may not always work out will make you more nimble and more comfortable. If this will be your first time managing a cover crop in the spring, start small. Try a few fields rather than the whole farm and expand after that. Each season will bring new challenges, but that's the beauty of farming. With a solid plan of how to handle your cover crops, you can really become the expert in how to use them on your farm.
High rate of biomass in the spring is almost always more of an issue of perception than it is an issue of actual agronomics. I see people, if you really want to see something impressive, Adam Doherty has videos of people planting into 10-foot tall sorghum and sun hemp and sunflowers, and I have customers who plant into stuff that, like they say, would hide Sasquatch. Guy has 2 foot tall of cover crop and is in a panic and sweating nervously and like, I'll never get through this. Say, before you panic and pull out the plow, just give it a try. Just give it a try. You will probably be shocked. Almost all modern planters are designed to go through a lot of stuff. And the more you mess with that, I have people say, well, should I go out and rotary mow that? Should I, it's like, no. Rotary mow, it's like someone threw a bunch of baling twine in the field.
We've had some great looking cover crops seeded at the end of September, flowing in September, and had a very cloudy, overcast October here and really stunted the growth of them. So when something doesn't take off one year and it takes off the next year, of course, it's a failure. We tell everybody, no, sunlight and temperature has a lot to do with it. They go hand in hand. If there's no sunlight, it can't photosynthesize. 3 years ago in 18, we had 3 days of sunlight in the month of October. It was cloudy, overcast for almost a whole month. We had cover crops grown, but they just really look tough all the time. And that makes it really discouraging for a grower. But if we get out and show them what's happening, they usually can understand the roots are still trying to develop as much as possible. The other part is with the species selection goes with this climatology is how long do they live in the fall? So some of our Nebraskas live down to 14 degrees for 20 some hours. Some will terminate at 20 degrees for 20 hours. So you really got to start looking at all those factors into this when you're picking these.
Now, I could also talk about the potential pitfalls of annual ryegrass, and which is not really an agronomic issue. It's a matter of killing annual ryegrass. A lot of people say, oh, that annual ryegrass, you just can't kill it. Well, yeah, you can, but it takes a specific set. You got to follow the instructions. The analogy I use is, changing the oil. There's 5 steps to changing oil. There's, unscrew the drain plug, take off the filter, put the drain plug back in, replace the filter, and put new oil in. If you do any 4 out of that 5, pick any 4 out of that 5, does changing the oil work? If you skip any one of those 5, you'll ruin the engine. And that's like killing annual ryegrass. The reason annual ryegrass is tough to kill is because it has a waxy leaf surface and spray solutions just run off. So when you're trying to kill annual ryegrass, you want to make sure that you are putting all the odds in your favor. You want to add extra surfactant. Fully loaded glyphosate is not loaded enough to kill annual ryegrass. You have to add additional surfactant. You need to add actual ammonium sulfate. Both the ammonium and the sulfate are important because they each play a role in moving that glyphosate into the leaf surface. Having a sticker like corn syrup is very beneficial in that solution, or molasses, some sort of sugary, sticky substance that will enable that to stick to the leaf surface. And kill when it's, and try to kill it when it's over 50 degrees, actively growing, and during daylight hours. Those are all very critical steps for killing annual ryegrass. If you follow those instructions, then you shouldn't have an issue.
Talked about this in the past, where they're at or where they're on their journey. So I was telling everybody, the starting point is corn and beans, cereal, rye is great. Starting point is a single species. You add, you can add turnips, you can add other things to that actually give you nice growth in the fall. But when you start moving up the ladder, that's when we start going like to the earlier interseeding, and corn going to beans, or corn on corn, or whatever it is, especially in our northern region where we're running out of daylight in the fall to get these multi-species working. And that's where, like Dale said, we use annual ryegrass. Now, the few things we do different, or we really promote our annual ryegrass, we use a diploid variety, which is not as waxy surface leaf like an Italian rye would be, so it is somewhat better to take the herbicide in. But the other part is we put mixes together. We try to use low rates of 2 brassicas that take the shading. We use a little bit of red clover that takes the shading well. And then the termination in the spring, the farther north you go, the more you have to really consider that time frame. We tell people between 9 and 3 during the day. Never spray after 3 o'clock, because it will not get through the plant into the root system. And you have to get it in the root system to kill it. The other part Dale talked about is the surfactants. It's excellent. We talk about, guys, checking the pH of your solution, not just the water. Check your solution. Don't use dirty water in your inductor to blow it into the system, because now you've caused a problem in that tank mix. The other thing is 100 degrees between day and night temperatures for the next 3-4 days after spraying really helps terminate annual ryegrass.
The real challenges of getting out in the spring and planting into those covers, and some of those physical challenges of knowing when to plant those cover crops, and knowing how and when to terminate those cover crops, or how to successfully plant into those cover crops. Those will be the biggest challenges that our farmers are going to be trying to figure out. And when the farmer does start to make those decisions, the biggest thing that I think is important in this process is that when they make that decision, that they need to commit to that decision and do it. What I've found is that people maybe wait because they're not sure about their decision, and then they've passed their key moment when they can get something done.
Thank you for watching another episode in our soil health video series. If you'd like to be notified every time a new video is published, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can also check out the other videos in the soil health series on the playlist. For more information on Cargill RegenConnect or American Farmland Trust, check out the corresponding links in the video description. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.